No matter whether you believe this tragedy is the result of something paranormal,
Hinterkaifeck farm murders. And you may have heard this story before, but
in late March 1922, a German family and their new maid were murdered at their remote farm. It would be days before anyone else found them, and what was uncovered during the investigation would leave you mind blown. The Gruber family would have never imagined that their neighbors would raze down their farm due to the horrid murder, and the strange happenings make some believe that something, not someone, was responsible. It's been over a century later, and the killer has still not been found, despite multiple investigations. This makes the Hinterkaifeck murders one of the oldest unsolved murders of a family in Germany. Welcome back to Crime Mystic, where we cover solved, unsolved, and mysterious cases from across the globe. Today, we're diving into the creepy case of the family murder of the Hinterkaifeck, which has remained unsolved a century later. This would send a chill down your spine. But before we go on, hit the subscribe button if you haven't, and get notified whenever we drop exciting videos. And like this video. Now, what happened to the residents of the Hinterkaifeck farm? The Hinterkaifeck farm was remote in Weidhofen, where the Gruber family lived. Andreas Gruber and his wife Cecilia Gruber lived there with their daughter, Victoria Gabriel, and their grandchildren, Cecilia and Joseph. They also had a maid, Maria Baumgartner, who had resumed work the day before the horrid murders. The Gruber family was known to keep to themselves and had enemies in the neighboring town. Neighbors only saw them when they went to church on Sundays and when their granddaughter, Cecilia, went to school. They also had a serious case 7 years before the murder. Andreas Gruber was accused of committing incest with his daughter, Victoria. Many believe that Victoria's son, Joseph, was the son of her father. They were put on trial and even found guilty, serving about a year in prison. Aside from this, the family remained peaceful on their small Bavarian homestead. But in the months leading up to the 31st of March 1922, their lives were anything but peaceful. In the months leading up to the killings, different strange events happened on the Hinterkaifeck farm that caused some people to speculate that the murder was anything but ordinary. Their previous maid had repeatedly told Andreas Gruber that she could hear footsteps in the attic, but whenever he checked, no one was there. The attic was also a wide space where no one could hide, so she was hushed whenever she reported it again. Over several weeks, she could hear the footsteps, but no one believed her. She feared that the house was haunted and quit, leaving the family under a lot of stress in managing their farm without help. After she quit, they could not find a replacement for the maid, keeping the entire family on edge. After their former maid had left, no strange noises were heard in the house. Eventually, Andreas started hearing tapping noises and footsteps in the attic, but there was no one there. He also told his neighbors that he saw footprints in the snow leading up to the barn, but no footprints were leading away from the barn. This made him believe whoever walked up to the barn did not leave, but he could not find anyone else in the house. Things started going missing around the house, notably a set of house keys, which made the family feel paranoid. He also found a newspaper that no family member had subscribed to in their home, and no one knew how it got there. Another strange happening was when Cecilia, their granddaughter, suddenly went missing one night. The entire family panicked and eventually found her in a daze. She could not explain why she left the farm, where she was going, or what she was doing. A couple of days later, there were signs of someone trying to break into the tool shed, but they seemed to fail. It seemed like the person was violent in trying to break the lock, which was even more surprising because no one heard anything. But in the midst of all this, the family finally got a new maid on the 31st of March. With all of this happening, Andreas' neighbor offered him one of his guns to protect himself and his family. He declined because he never believed he would need it. Could he be more wrong? The gruesome scene of the murdered Gruber family members would be eventually discovered on the 4th of April 1922. Although no one had seen them since the 31st of March, the community had noticed that they did not attend church and their granddaughter did not go to school. A repairman scheduled to come to the farm showed up to repair the feeding machine. When he didn't get a response from any of the family members, he repaired it. Before leaving, he tells their neighbor that none of the people on the farm responded to his knocks. Their neighbor, Lorenz Schlittenbauer, noticed that the farm had a pile of unread mail at the entrance. Since he was worried, he called their other neighbor, Michael Pohl and Jakob Sigel, to investigate. Upon entering the home, what they would find would change everything. The bodies of Andreas, Cecilia, Victoria, and Cecilia the granddaughter were in the barn, stacked on top of each other and covered up by a board and some hay. Each of them had been killed with multiple blows to the head by a hatchet. They went deeper into the home and found the gruesome scene of the 2-year-old grandson Joseph and the new maid, bludgeoned to death where they slept. This launched the start of a century-long investigation that has made no headway till today. As Hinterkaifeck was a remote town, the closest police department was about 45 minutes away, but the neighbors had already alerted each other, and some men had walked into the home and barn to check what had happened. By the time the detectives arrived on the scene from Munich, tens of people had walked through the crime scene, and so the evidence was compromised from the start. The lead investigator of the case was George Reingruber. He had theorized that the killer had lured the 4 family members out in the barn one by one to murder them before going to kill Joseph and Maria. While this was a plausible idea, there was no forensic testing and the crime scene had been tampered with. Also, how was it possible to lure all 4 family members without raising suspicion in the home? These are questions that would not be answered. The autopsy results were not for the faint of heart, as they revealed something even more horrible about the case. All the family members died of blunt trauma to the head, and the older Cecilia was also strangled. But the worst case was the granddaughter Cecilia, who they found holding fistfuls of her hair. It was suspected that she died from shock and her injuries, and it took hours, as she was trapped under her family's bodies. Simply horrid. As if the case of death wasn't horrible enough, the police made a mind-blowing discovery that changed the outlook of the case. Although the victims were found on the 4th of April, the police determined that they had all died on the evening of the 31st of March. This was the first day of the new maid, and her sister told the police that everyone was alive when she visited the farm that afternoon. But by the next day, 2 coffee salesmen came by the farm, but there was no answer. Despite this, there was smoke coming from the chimney. There were also reports that someone fed the livestock on the farm, and the police noticed that someone had been eating in the kitchen even after they were dead. This could only mean one thing: someone lived in the house after the murders. The police determined that the perpetrator had been secretly living in the farmhouse for months and even remained after killing the family. There was still a lot of cash in the house, so a robbery was ruled out, and it could not be a crime of passion, because why live in the house after the murder? It seemed like the police were met with more questions the more they investigated. Throughout investigations and re-investigations into the Hinterkaifeck murders, there have been over 100 suspects, but with no killer. One of the main suspects was Lorenz Schlittbauer, who some believed was secretly Joseph's father, but there was no way to tie him to the murders. Another suspect was Victoria's husband, Carl Gabriel, who died in World War I. He was the true owner of the farm, and it went to Victoria when he was reported dead, although his body was never found. Some say he returned to murder the family in revenge due to Victoria's incest with her father, but these theories were never proven. An unfortunate and bizarre aspect of this case is the victims' skulls. The Gruber family and their maid were buried without their heads because the skulls were kept in Munich in an attempt to learn more about the perpetrators. But after the commotion caused by World War II, the skulls went missing and have not been found to this day. There have been different re-investigations into the Hinterkaifeck murders, but no suspect or killer has been named. In 1999, an older woman reported that her landlord had information on the killings, but it turned out that the landlord had said this in 1935, and he was no longer alive. By 2007, students at the Fürstenfeldbruck Police Academy investigated the unsolved case and suspected one person, but the suspect was already dead, so they did not announce the name of the person they believed was responsible. It's been 101 years since the gruesome murder of the Gruber family and their maid, and all hopes of finding the killer have gone down the drain. The murder case has become more of a myth than a true happening. What do you think happened in that house? Was it the work of a disturbed person, or were there some supernatural elements involved? We have some thoughts about this case, but we are more curious about your thoughts. Let us know in the comments below.